My name is Russell Staples. I grew up in South Africa and served in the church for about 20 years in Africa, and then came to Andrews and taught here, and we've been here for a while. I'm recalling, and I've been through the materials I've collected over the years of the beginnings of Adventism in South Africa, going back to the very early days. Fletcher, Tarr and Davies had returned to the Eastern Cape, and they had encouraged the folks, now we have a group here, bring Ira Hankins here to Grahamstown area. And so he did. Ira Hankins, A.T. Robinson had arrived, who eventually was in charge of the church. And Fletcher Tarr met him at the railroad station at Grahamstown, the city of the saints, and took him out into the Rokeby Park area, where they met and they began meetings there. They wanted to hold meetings in the Methodist Church where they were, but no, the Methodist minister would not allow this. So they met in the house of Pittaway, a friend. He lived in a house that had been sort of a small hotel at one stage, so it had a large room. And Hankins there taught them, and as one of them said here, we discovered in these meetings a new beauty in the harmony of the Bible. And he convinced many to become Sabbath-keeping people. Among these were the Wilmore, that name, Staples, my grandfather, his grandfather was an 1820, all of these were 1820 settlers. My grandfather's grandfather was an 1820 settler. The Tarrs, Pittaway, Davies, Sparrow, Purden, Bradfield, and many others were attending here. These were very sincere Christians, convinced Methodists, as they were there. And as they were meeting there and working together on all of this, all of this upset the Methodist minister a great deal. And they used to, while they couldn't hold their meetings in the Methodist Church, they did with Pittaway, they would go on Wednesday evenings and hold prayer meetings in the Methodist Church. But they were not dealing with the Sabbath, they were just meeting there. And while they were in the midst of this prayer meeting, the pastor, the Methodist pastor, came in, and he took them all on very seriously where they were there. He said, I hear of you, brethren, that you are no longer working on the Lord's day. Aren't you reverent to the Lord? What's happened? What's gone wrong to you? And he read Galatians chapter 3. This I have heard from some who were present at that occasion. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes Jesus was betrayed. Did you receive the Spirit by observing the law? And he continued, did God give you his blessings and miracles because you observe the law? Anyway, he considered. And he was very serious with them and worked them. As that proceeded, and he was working with them, he dismissed the whole group, and he said, I'd like you, the lay leaders of the church here, to remain. There were 6 of them. And he started addressing them with utter seriousness. And then A.W. Staples, that's my grandfather, stood up and he said, I would suggest that what we do here now is those of you who are determined to keep the Sabbath, stand up with me. And 5 of the 6 stood up. And the minister said, very well, I take out my pen here and I'm striking your names off the register of this church. You are no longer members of this Methodist Church. You are betraying the master. And so that was over, the meeting, and they went to Purden's house, which is nearby, one of the 1820 settlers' house, all the rest. And that was the beginning of the Adventist Church at Rokeby Park, where they were. That was 1889, and I gave you the documents, which the date and all the rest. They very soon established a Sabbath school of 26 members, and 12 people were baptized. But they didn't build a church yet. An interesting thing of this, which I enjoyed, is after this sort of heavy duty and all of this tension, the Adventist Church, they said, well, let's go off and celebrate. And so they took 2 ox wagons loaded with people, and they went down. They were, 20 miles from the ocean, little rivers down there. They went down and celebrated 2 weeks together. Hankins was with them, like a little camp meeting out at the ocean. And that's where they sort of learned and consolidated everything while they were together, as it were. Hankins returned to Cape Town, where they were, and in the meantime, in I think it was 1891, Peter Wessels had sold his farm. A diamond mine was discovered there. He sold it for £350,000. I don't know exactly what the exchange would be. That would have been more than $1 million back in those days. And no, so they donated £3,900. They bought a property in Rowland Street, Cape Town, and shortly thereafter a church was built and established. And this was of so much interest to the company generally, that the consecration service was published in the Cape Town Argus. My father had a copy of that, and I wish I had those documents. Years later, W.H. Branson, 1920, came as president of the church and establishing the South African Union, broader actually, held meetings in Cape Town. These were published as well, and he had those meetings, but this could not continue. Anyway, the church was organized and established. In 1892, it was decided to establish a South African conference, and there Ernest Ingle, my wife's grandfather, my grandfather, A.W. Staples, were a member, and the South African church was organized. There was a membership then of about 300 people. They had already gained in those years in South Africa. Then soon there were many developments. A college was established near Claremont, where they were there, and in due course a sanitarium, and this continued. By 1920, when W.H. Branson was there and they were organizing the Africa division, there were 3,000 members. Another date that I remember that I cannot forget is that in 1939, I was living in Johannesburg, and at worship one Friday evening, my father read from the Review and Herald that the Adventist Church was now celebrating the fact we had 500,000 members in the world. And Johannesburg at that time was also celebrating an anniversary. It had 500,000 people. I had grown up traveling, and we had small Adventist churches all over South Africa by this time. We had large churches in Johannesburg and Cape Town. But now to think there were 500,000 Adventists, as big as in this big city, Johannesburg. It was just wonderful for us. So the church was established in South Africa and has been a blessing and rejoiced the lives of many.